My wife cheated with our gardener. She never expected what I did next. I built my life slowly and deliberately, not through luck or shortcuts, but through years of discipline, risk, and restraint. Every success I had came from choices I made when no one was watching. By the time I was established, I believed control was the most valuable thing a man could have. Control over time, money, emotions, and trust. My wife entered my life before the success fully arrived, which made me believe our bond was real and tested. 7 years together, 4 of them as husband and wife. She often spoke about how safe she felt with me, how predictable and calm our life was. I believed that calm was proof of love. Our house reflected that belief. Large, clean, quiet. A place where nothing unexpected was supposed to happen. That was the reason I hired help. Not because I needed it, but because efficiency mattered to me. The gardener was a student, young, polite, eager to earn. He accepted a small fee without negotiation. He worked quietly and stayed out of the way, at least that is what I thought. I barely spoke to him beyond brief instructions. He nodded respectfully and avoided eye contact. The garden flourished, and I stopped thinking about him altogether, until the first moment that felt wrong. It was an ordinary evening when I returned home earlier than planned. The sun was still up and the driveway was empty except for my car and his old bicycle leaning near the porch. As I parked, I saw him step out of my front door instead of the side entrance. He stopped when he noticed me. His body stiffened like he had been caught somewhere he did not belong. I asked calmly why he was inside the house. He hesitated for a second too long, then said my wife offered him water because it was hot. His voice was thin and uncertain. I nodded slowly and said nothing else. He hurried past me toward the garden. I stood there longer than necessary staring at my own door. It made no sense. He had access to the guest shed with its own small kitchen. My wife knew that. Still, I pushed the thought aside. I had learned to ignore doubts that lacked evidence. That night, I mentioned it lightly while we ate. My wife laughed quickly and told me I was overthinking. She said he probably forgot where the shed was. Her smile faded too fast. I noticed it but chose silence. Days went by, and small details began to stack up in my mind. She started changing outfits in the middle of the day for no clear reason. Her phone never left her hand and always rested face down. She asked about my schedule more often, especially when I would be home late. The gardener began staying longer than agreed. When I questioned him, he said he wanted the garden to look perfect. His hands trembled as he spoke. The air between us felt strained. One afternoon, I came home without warning. The house was unusually quiet. As I walked toward the back, I heard laughter, soft and brief, the kind that disappears when it realizes it has been heard. I turned the corner and saw them standing close, not touching but closer than necessary. My wife looked startled, then annoyed. The gardener stepped back immediately, lowering his eyes. My chest tightened and heat rushed through me. Every instinct told me what this meant. My wife began speaking rapidly, explaining without actually explaining anything. The gardener apologized without knowing why. I wanted to explode, to confront, to demand the truth. Instead, something inside me locked everything down. I said nothing, turned away, and walked back into the house. Behind me, my wife called my name, her voice cracking. That night, I sat alone in the dark, replaying every moment I had ignored, every sign I had dismissed because it was inconvenient. I understood then that betrayal rarely announces itself. It hides in routine and patience. It grows in the blind spots of trust. By morning, my decision was made. I would not beg or accuse or shout. I would act quietly, carefully, and completely. But first, I needed to see how far the truth went. The next morning, I left the house the same way I always did, calm, measured, predictable. I kissed my wife on the cheek and told her I had a long day ahead. I watched her closely as I spoke. There was a pause in her breathing, a fraction of a second where her body reacted before her words did. She smiled and wished me luck. That pause stayed with me as I drove away. Instead of heading to the office, I turned toward a quiet part of the city and parked near a small cafe I rarely visited. I sat there for hours without touching my phone, watching strangers live ordinary lives while mine quietly unraveled. I thought about confronting her directly and dismissed it. Confrontation gives people a chance to rewrite reality, and I needed the truth unfiltered. By midday, my decision was clear. I would observe, not accuse. I would confirm, not assume. When I returned home earlier than expected, I told my wife that meetings were canceled. Her smile appeared a little too late, and she immediately suggested we have lunch together. The way she said it felt like a performance. I agreed and sat across from her, noticing how often she checked her phone and how carefully she chose her words. When the gardener arrived, she went quiet. Her posture changed subtly, like someone aware of being watched. She avoided eye contact with him, yet seemed aware of his every movement. After lunch, I said I needed to take a work call and went upstairs. From the window, I could see the entire garden clearly. Minutes later, she stepped outside claiming she needed fresh air. The gardener followed shortly after pretending to work on plants that were already trimmed. They spoke in low voices, standing closer than necessary. I could not hear what they said, but I saw familiarity in their movements. The way she tilted her head toward him, the way he mirrored her posture. This was not spontaneous or accidental. This was practiced. Something inside me settled into a cold, steady clarity. The rest of the day, I stayed silent and watched. When evening came, she acted affectionate, touching my arm, asking questions, offering warmth that now felt borrowed. I responded politely without giving anything of myself. Later that night, when she was asleep, I sat alone in the living room and opened the security system I had installed years earlier. I had forgotten it existed because I never felt the need to look. Now I watched days unfold in minutes, timestamps showing patterns I had ignored. The gardener arriving when my car left the driveway. My wife checking outside before opening the door. Conversations that lingered too long, smiles that belonged to someone else. Nothing explicit, nothing dramatic, just enough to destroy everything. What hurt most was how normal it looked. Betrayal dressed as routine. By morning, I felt no anger, only certainty. I met my lawyer quietly and asked for divorce papers prepared immediately without discussion or delay. When I returned home, I placed the envelope on the table and asked my wife to sit down. She knew before opening it. Her face lost color and her hands began to shake. She cried instantly, asking me to listen, saying it was not what it seemed, saying she felt lonely, saying it was a mistake that never crossed a line. I listened until her words ran out. Then I told her calmly that trust does not break loudly, it erodes quietly. And once it is gone, it does not return. She begged me to reconsider, to remember our history, our years, our plans. I told her I remembered them clearly, and that was why I was done. I did not insult her or raise my voice. I packed a small bag and walked past her as she collapsed onto the floor sobbing. Outside, the gardener stood frozen, unsure whether to speak or disappear. I looked at him once and said nothing. Some truths do not need words. That night, alone in a hotel room, I realized the most painful part was not losing her, but understanding that the life I believed I was protecting had already been taken from me long before I noticed. And that realization changed the way I saw everything that came next. The days after I left the house blurred together in a way I had never experienced before. Time moved, but without structure. I went to the office out of habit and left early without reason. People spoke to me, and I answered automatically. My mind stayed somewhere else, replaying memories with new context. Moments that once felt harmless now revealed their shape. I realized betrayal does not just take a person, it steals the past too. Because every memory becomes suspicious, every smile questioned. After a week, my wife stopped calling and started sending long messages instead. Paragraphs of explanations, apologies, promises. She said the gardener meant nothing, that it started as conversation and comfort and turned into something she did not plan. She said she never stopped loving me. I read every message once and never replied. Silence was the only thing I had left to give. Meanwhile, I began uncovering details I never thought I would need. My lawyer informed me that she had already contacted one of her own. She was preparing to fight for more than she deserved. The idea did not surprise me. People who betray trust rarely accept consequences quietly. I returned to the house one afternoon while she was away to collect documents. Walking through those rooms felt unreal. Everything was exactly where I left it, yet nothing belonged to me anymore. In my office drawer, I found receipts for garden equipment I never approved, expensive items charged to our shared account. It was careless and revealing. I checked our financial records more closely and found small transfers spread over months. Amounts insignificant alone but obvious together, money I had unknowingly paid to support my own replacement. The realization tightened something in my chest, but I stayed focused. Emotions waste energy, and I needed clarity. Later that evening, my lawyer called and told me something unexpected. The gardener was not just a student. He had dropped out months earlier and was using different addresses for work. His employment record was inconsistent and his references were vague. My wife either did not know or did not care. Both possibilities carried weight. The next twist came when the gardener himself tried to contact me. A message sent late at night asking to talk. Curiosity outweighed anger, and I agreed to meet in a public place. When he arrived, he looked smaller than I remembered, nervous, restless, unable to meet my eyes. He said he wanted to apologize and explain. He claimed my wife pursued him, not the other way around, that she complained about loneliness and pressure and expectations. He said he felt important, needed seen. I listened without interrupting, not because I believed him, but because people reveal more when they think they are being heard. When he finished, I told him calmly that his explanation changed nothing. Choices still belonged to him. He asked if I would ruin his life. I told him his life was his responsibility, not mine. Then I stood up and left. Walking away felt different this time. Lighter, as if closure does not require forgiveness, only boundaries. Days later, the legal process accelerated. My wife demanded mediation and proposed reconciliation during the same meeting. Contradiction wrapped in desperation. She cried again, spoke about memories, future children, shared dreams. I listened with the same calm I used in business negotiations. When she finished, I said one sentence: "Trust is not rebuilt with words, it is proven with time, and you no longer have access to mine." That ended the discussion. As the divorce moved forward, I began to understand something uncomfortable about myself. I had built my life around control and stability and ignored emotional risk. I assumed loyalty was permanent once earned. That assumption had cost me years, yet instead of breaking me, it clarified everything. I started sleeping better, thinking clearer. The garden was no longer my concern, and strangely, that absence felt like relief. I did not know yet that the final twist was still waiting quietly in the background, one that would force both of them to face consequences neither of them expected. As the divorce process moved forward, I returned fully to work, not to escape, but to regain structure. Routine became my anchor again. Meetings, numbers, strategies, all things that obey logic. Yet even their consequences followed me. People notice when something changes, even if they do not know what. My wife began appearing unpredictable. Some days calm, cooperative, other days aggressive, accusing me of cruelty and abandonment. Her lawyer pushed for financial claims that ignored reality. I responded through mine with facts, documents, timelines. Emotion does not survive long under light. Meanwhile, I made a decision that surprised even me. I fired the gardener officially and formally, not out of anger, but because trust was gone. He did not argue or protest. He simply nodded and left his tools behind like someone who knew the end had already arrived. Weeks later, I learned why. A former neighbor contacted me asking if I was aware that my wife had been seen with the gardener long before I confronted them. Not inside the house, but elsewhere. Cafes, libraries, even a small apartment complex across town. Patterns. Again, always patterns. I asked my lawyer to look deeper into financial overlaps. What we found changed the entire direction of the case. My wife had signed as a guarantor on a short-term lease without my knowledge. Payments came from our joint account under disguised categories. Legally, it was problematic for her, not for me. When confronted with evidence during mediation, she went silent for the first time. No tears, no explanations, just silence. The gardener disappeared entirely after that. Phone disconnected, social media gone. People do not run unless they feel pressure. Shortly after, I received another message from him, this time not apologetic, but fearful. He said my wife was blaming him for everything, threatening him legally and personally. I did not respond. I was done participating in their chaos. Then something unexpected happened. My wife asked to meet alone without lawyers. Curiosity again outweighed resistance. We met in a quiet, neutral place. She looked different, thinner, more rigid. She said she finally understood what she had lost and asked for one last chance, not to return to the marriage, but to leave without destruction. She admitted the affair fully without excuses and confessed she believed I would never leave because of my calm nature. That assumption stunned me more than the betrayal itself. She thought stability meant weakness. She mistook silence for tolerance. I told her calmly that the version of me she relied on no longer existed, and that consequences are not punishment, they are results. She asked if I hated her. I said no, because hate requires energy, and I had already reclaimed mine. The legal outcome followed quickly after that. Assets were divided fairly and cleanly, because facts do not negotiate. When it was over, I returned to the house alone for the first time as its sole owner. The garden had grown wild in my absence. Weeds, uneven lines, disorder everywhere. I considered hiring someone new, but decided against it. Instead, I spent days working on it myself. Not because I enjoyed it, but because it reminded me that neglected things grow distorted. Trust, like gardens, requires boundaries, attention, and honesty. One evening, while clearing the back area, I found something that explained everything. A small notebook hidden behind old tools. It belonged to my wife. Pages filled with doubts, complaints, fantasies, resentment that predated the affair by years. The betrayal was not sudden, it was inevitable. Reading it hurt less than I expected, because clarity ends confusion. I burned the notebook and watched the smoke disappear, knowing I had finally closed the chapter completely. What I did not know yet was that both of them would soon learn that walking away does not erase responsibility, and that the calm man they underestimated had not lost control, he had simply chosen timing. After everything was finalized, I expected relief to arrive instantly, but instead it came slowly in layers, each day removing a piece of weight I had carried without realizing it. The house felt different, not empty, but honest. There was no tension in the air. No waiting for explanations, no rehearsed conversations. Silence returned to its natural form. I focused on rebuilding routines that belonged only to me. Early mornings, long walks, deliberate meals. Control returned not as defense, but as clarity. Then the consequences I had not initiated began unfolding on their own. My lawyer informed me that my ex-wife was under financial review related to undisclosed liabilities. The lease she signed had triggered a chain reaction when payment stopped. Creditors do not care about emotional stories, they care about signatures. She reached out again, this time not to reconcile, but to ask for help, guidance, support. I listened carefully and told her I would not interfere, not out of revenge, but because involvement would only blur boundaries again. She accused me of being heartless, then apologized minutes later. Instability had replaced confidence. Around the same time, I received notice that the gardener had attempted to use my address as a reference for employment. It was rejected immediately. The truth follows people quietly and persistently. Weeks later, I learned he had been questioned regarding misrepresented credentials and unpaid obligations. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal enough for headlines, just enough to close doors permanently. Watching this unfold taught me something important. Restraint does not mean inaction, it means allowing reality to do its work. I did not push or threaten or expose. I simply stepped aside. One evening, I attended a business event where someone mentioned my divorce, casually assuming I was broken by it. I corrected them calmly, saying it was a correction, not a loss. That sentence surprised even me. Later that night, I realized I was no longer reacting to the past, I was responding to the present. The final twist came unexpectedly when my ex-wife asked to meet one last time, not to ask for anything, but to tell me something. Against my better judgment, I agreed. She told me she had believed control meant safety, and that safety meant permanence. She said she never thought consequences would arrive without confrontation. She admitted she underestimated stillness. I listened, and then said something that ended it completely. Accountability does not require anger, it only requires truth. She nodded and left without another word. Months passed, and the garden finally returned to order under my own care. Each line straight, each plant intentional. I understood then that betrayal did not take my life away, it returned it to me stripped of illusion. What remains now is quieter, stronger, and entirely mine. And that is something no one can take again. Time passed in a way that finally felt natural again. Not rushed, not heavy, not distorted by waiting for something to go wrong. I stopped measuring days by what had happened before and started measuring them by what I chose to do next. The legal noise faded completely, and my name returned to being just a name, not a subject of quiet conversations. Work expanded in directions I had postponed for years. New investments, new locations, new responsibilities. Clarity has a way of multiplying results. Yet peace is never empty, it leaves space for reflection, and reflection brings understanding. I began to see the pattern that led me here, not just in my marriage, but in myself. I had confused reliability with invulnerability. I believed providing stability was enough to secure loyalty. I rarely asked questions when things felt off. Because I trusted structure more than emotion. That was my blind spot. Not love, not trust, but assumption. One evening while sorting old files, I found photos from the early years of our relationship. Trips, smiles, moments that were real at the time. I did not feel pain looking at them, only distance, like watching footage of a life that belonged to someone else. It confirmed what I already knew. The end was not sudden, it was delayed. Around that same period, I received an unexpected call from a mutual acquaintance. They told me my ex-wife had moved again, struggling to find consistency. She spoke often about regret, but rarely about responsibility. The gardener had vanished from her life completely, not with closure, but with silence, the kind that leaves questions unanswered forever. Hearing this did not satisfy me or upset me, it simply reinforced my understanding. People who build their choices on avoidance eventually live inside it. I began mentoring younger colleagues at work and noticed something ironic. Many of them feared calm decisions, believing intensity meant importance. I told them something I had learned the hard way. Quiet choices shaped the longest outcomes. Not everyone understood it, but those who did listened carefully. Later that year, I met someone new, not through intention, but circumstance. There was no rush, no performance, no illusion of perfection. Conversations were direct, pauses comfortable. Trust was not declared, it was observed. I did not speak about my past immediately, not because it was hidden, but because it no longer defined me. When I eventually did, the response was simple. Acceptance, not curiosity. That was when I knew I had changed. Not hardened, not closed, just precise. The final realization came on an ordinary afternoon while I stood in the garden watching plants grow evenly under consistent care. I understood that betrayal did not end my marriage, my refusal to ignore reality did, and that refusal was the first honest act I had made in years. I did not win or lose, I corrected direction. Some stories end with confrontation, others with forgiveness. Mine ended with alignment. The calm I once feared losing became the calm I rebuilt on truth. And that is when I understood the most important lesson of all. Control is not about holding tighter, it is about knowing when to let go and trusting yourself to stand firm afterward. Looking back now, I understand why everything unfolded the way it did. Not because it was meant to happen, but because I was finally ready to see clearly. The final stage was not closure with them, but reconciliation with myself. Months after everything settled, I walked through the house one quiet morning, noticing details I had ignored for years. Light through windows, sounds of the city, distance between rooms. Nothing felt haunted or heavy. It felt neutral, and neutral is powerful. It means nothing is owed to the past anymore. I realized I no longer replayed conversations or imagined alternate outcomes. The mind stops doing that when it accepts reality fully. One day I received a message from my ex-wife that I almost did not open. It was short and simple. She said she was leaving the city, starting over somewhere no one knew her story. She thanked me for not destroying her publicly and apologized without explanation. I read it once and did not respond, not out of cruelty, but because some endings do not require dialogue. Silence in that moment was not avoidance, it was completion. Around the same time, I heard through unrelated channels that the gardener had taken short-term work in different places, unable to stay anywhere long. Reputation follows behavior quietly and consistently. I felt no satisfaction in that knowledge, only confirmation. Life corrects imbalance without needing direction. As the seasons changed, the garden reached a balance I had never seen before. Not perfect, but alive, maintained with attention, not neglect. I spent time there often not to think, but to exist. And in those moments, I understood the most important shift had already happened inside me. I no longer defined success by what I owned or who stood beside me. I defined it by alignment between thought, action, and truth. That alignment is rare and fragile, but once built, it does not collapse easily. New relationships, new projects, new risks entered my life naturally, not forced. I trusted slower, spoke less, listened more. I asked questions when something fell off instead of dismissing instinct. I stopped believing that calm meant nothing was wrong and started understanding that calm must be supported by honesty. One evening, a younger colleague asked me how I stayed so composed through everything. I told him something simple: composure is not the absence of pain, it is the refusal to let pain decide your behavior. That lesson had cost me years, but returned everything. My story does not end with revenge or triumph or public validation. It ends with clarity and peace built on reality, not illusion. I did not lose my wife to a gardener. I lost a version of my life that depended on ignoring truth. What replaced it was quieter, stronger, and real. And that is the ending most people never notice because it does not make noise. It simply stands firm long after everything else falls away.